I've talked to you on a number of occasions about the economic problems and opportunities our nation faces.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for major events and trends of the 1980s that have reverberated through history.
But as expected as the death may have been, it nevertheless had a stunning impact around the world.
Number 10, discovery of the DNA fingerprint.
I was aware at that time that Dr. Alec Jeffreys had been working at Leicester University in respect of DNA tests.
In 1984, British geneticist Sir Alec Jeffreys made an epoch-defining discovery. He realized that he could identify unique patterns in a strand of DNA, creating a DNA fingerprint for individuals. This groundbreaking method revolutionized both law enforcement and medicine around the world. Criminal investigators could now more accurately identify suspects and exonerate the wrongly imprisoned. Today, they use a database of sites like 23andMe to find familial matches for criminal suspects.
For years, Patrick Mark Perkins eluded police until pioneering forensic work finally tracked him down.
In medicine, DNA fingerprinting led to massive leaps forward in genetic research. We now have a greater understanding of inherited diseases. Doctors are starting to personalize treatments based on an individual's genetic makeup, and diseases can be targeted on the genetic level.
It's not just a treatment, but it's actually a genetic cure. Accomplish something nobody else has ever done. I mean, that's amazing, right?
Number 9, man-made environmental disasters.
The scenes are simply hellish. So much suffering from India's invisible killer. At one point, an official said one death was being recorded every minute from the poison gas leak in the city of Bhopal.
Globalization and widespread deregulation led to a spike in both the volume and scope of man-made environmental disasters. In 1984, for example, Union Carbide India Limited was responsible for the worst industrial disaster in human history. Toxic methyl isocyanate gas leaked from their pesticide plant in Bhopal, India. Hundreds of thousands were exposed, leading to widespread respiratory, neurological, and reproductive issues and thousands of deaths.
Entire streets near the factory are nearly deserted, with houses locked up and empty.
Similar health problems occurred thanks to the Chernobyl nuclear disaster 2 years later. Massive amounts of radioactive material were released into Ukraine, devastating the local environment. In 1989, the Exxon Valdez oil spill off the coast of Alaska poured millions of gallons of crude oil into the ocean, decimating marine life and ecosystems.
The tanker Exxon Valdez, gouged by a reef, more than 8.5 million gallons, poured into Prince William Sound, a prime fishing and recreation area.
Number 8, Reaganomics and the rise of wealth inequality.
In the late 1970s, we were economically struggling as a nation, but relatively equal as a people. That changed in the 1980s.
President Ronald Reagan changed the landscape of American politics with his 1980 win. He implemented his economic plan, dubbed Reaganomics, instituting a regime of tax cuts, deregulation, and reduced government spending. These policies spurred a surge in wealth, especially among corporations and the already rich, leading to a booming stock market and economic growth. However, they also contributed to rising income inequality.
And most likely, only a small handful of rich individuals at the top become even richer.
Benefits of growth were concentrated at the top as wages for the middle and lower income workers stagnated. Across the Atlantic, British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher implemented similar policies. She privatized industries and cut taxes. There, too, the rich prospered and inequality rose. Together, Reagan and Thatcher's economic philosophies reshaped global capitalism. Their neoliberal policies influenced the world economy for decades.
She introduced free market policies that helped the country throw off its post-war malaise and shook up the banking world with a flurry of deregulation.
Number 7, the First Lebanese War and the First Intifada.
In 1987, following an incident with the Israeli Defense Forces that left 4 Palestinian refugees dead, Palestinian militia led a violent uprising known as the First Intifada.
The Lebanese Civil War erupted in 1975, creating a chaotic power vacuum that drew in regional powers. After the PLO established a stronghold in the beleaguered nation, Israel invaded in 1982. This invasion deeply destabilized Lebanon and sparked the rise of Hezbollah as a real military power there. They entered the world stage a year later when they bombed a U.S. Marine barracks as well as French paratroopers.
Further peace talks in 2000 proved unsuccessful, when agreements could not be reached on issues like the status of Jerusalem, the rights of refugees, and increased Jewish settlements in Palestinian lands.
This once again cranked up regional tensions and set the stage for decades of future conflicts. Meanwhile, the first intifada in the Palestinian territories began in 1987 after 20 years of occupation. The consequences of these events are still being felt today as the war in Gaza intensifies.
But many people associate Israel with its ongoing conflict with Palestine, a violent dispute over land, political control, and resources.
Number 6, the HIV/AIDS epidemic.
You've tested positive for HIV, which is the virus that causes AIDS.
In the early 1980s, rumors began to spread of a disease starting to ravage the gay community. Soon, these rumors were undeniable, as America and the world were forced to confront the devastating HIV/AIDS epidemic. Fear and stigma surrounded the disease, prevalent in already marginalized communities, and governments struggled to respond.
The facts may also help this man, Daryl Yates Rist. He's a journalist. He's gay. And he's thankful the world's finally taking notice of a disease that has killed so many.
It hit sub-Saharan Africa particularly hard, with millions dying from the virus. Social and economic upheaval continued well into the 1990s, as AIDS became one of the deadliest pandemics in human history. Human rights activists begged the world to stem the tide of this plague. After 2 decades of mounting deaths, PEPFAR was created in 2003. This initiative has since provided life-saving treatment, reducing the spread of AIDS and making HIV manageable for millions.
He's recently reported extensively on PEPFAR, its impact, and the threat of funding cuts, and what that threat looks like.
Number 5, a global spike in political assassinations.
On this day 30 years ago, shots rang out in Washington, and President Ronald Reagan was wounded by gunfire.
The 1980s were marked by a wave of political assassinations and attempts around the globe. Some were driven by ideological conflicts and power struggles, but not all. In 1981, President Reagan survived an assassination attempt by a mentally ill man seeking fame.
He was wounded. My God. The president was hit.
That same year, Pope John Paul II was nearly killed by a Turkish gunman linked to political conspiracies. British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher narrowly escaped an IRA bombing in 1984. No political sides were safe. Archbishop Oscar Romero in El Salvador and Egyptian President Anwar Sadat were murdered by right-wing revanchists. Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was assassinated by her own bodyguards. Even pop culture figures like John Lennon were not immune, and his 1980 murder shocked the world.
This evening, John Lennon arrived at the emergency room at the Roosevelt Hospital. He was dead at the time of his arrival.
Number 4, globalization and free trade.
Other nations face very severe economic difficulties. In fact, both developed and developing countries alike have been in the grip of the longest worldwide recession in post-war history.
The combination of technological advancements, deregulation, and neoliberal economic policies of the 1980s created fertile ground for a surge in free trade and globalization. Championed by leaders like Reagan and Thatcher, these policies reduced trade barriers and promoted open markets. They encouraged the flow of goods, services, and capital across international borders.
But our economic system, based on individual freedom, private initiative, and free trade, has produced more human progress than any other in history.
Multinational corporations took center stage as they created global supply chains. These changes reduced the cost of goods, shifted manufacturing jobs to cheaper locations in developing nations, and forged long-lasting bonds between nations. While globalization boosted economic growth and innovation, it also led to outsourcing. Job displacement became the norm in industrialized nations. While prices decreased, inequality and environmental exploitation spread like wildfire around the globe.
There are a number of people who have been suffering as the economy is changing, and how some local labor markets are facing competition from overseas and things like that. So these kinds of dislocations happened.
Number 3, the death of Leonid Brezhnev.
High atop the Kremlin tonight, a Soviet flag at half-staff, a symbol of mourning for Leonid Ilyich Brezhnev, President of the Soviet Union.
This 1982 event marked the end of the reign of the Soviet Union's old guard of hardliners. Brezhnev's successors, Andropov and Chernenko, briefly maintained the status quo. They were soon displaced by Mikhail Gorbachev in 1985, signaling a new era.
We decided that we must help to decrease the threat of nuclear war.
Gorbachev introduced glasnost, openness, and perestroika, reconstructing, in an attempt to reform the stagnant Soviet system. These reforms loosened state control, leading to an increase in both political freedoms and economic turmoil. Gorbachev and Reagan's meeting at the Geneva summit in 1985 signaled the beginning of the end of the Cold War. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 symbolized the collapse of the Soviet influence in Eastern Europe. By 1991, the Soviet Union itself dissolved.
This is the scene tonight at the Berlin Wall. We'll take you there live.
Number 2, Deng Xiaoping's open-door policy and China's rise as a superpower.
88% of people were living in absolute poverty. China's economy was just 5% of the United States', and its GDP per capita was the equivalent of Zambia's.
First introduced in the late 1970s and instituted in the 1980s, the policy marked a dramatic shift in China's economic strategy. They pivoted from strict communist controls to market-oriented reforms. Deng transformed the nation into a global economic powerhouse thanks to foreign investment, trade, and technology.
Fast forward 40 years, and China is unrecognizable.
Special economic zones attracted multinational corporations. As a result, the 1980s sparked a period of rapid industrialization and export-led growth. Hundreds of millions were lifted out of poverty as China became the world's factory. China's GDP would continue to soar as it became a key player in global trade and finance. Deng's reforms laid the foundation for its emergence as a geopolitical superpower. Today, they are the primary challenger to U.S. dominance around the world.
700 million people have been lifted out of poverty, and its share of the global economy has gone from 1.8% in 1978 to 18.2% in 2017.
Before we unveil our top pick, here are a few honorable mentions. Rise of the video game industry. From Pong to Pac-Man, NES to Game Boy, video games revolutionized entertainment.
The Mario Brothers with Mario from Donkey Kong, his brother Luigi, and lots of crazy creatures. And it's twice the fun when two play at once, because you need all the help you can get. Mario, where are you? Mario Brothers, new from Atari.
Famine in Ethiopia. Nearly 2 billion watched the Live Aid concert to combat it.
He said, "You've got to come on and sing, you know." I said, "I can't, Bob, I haven't got a band together now." He said, "Well, you just sit at the piano and do your own number." How's that for a Geldof person? So that was it, you know, I just had to come. Simple as that.
Rise of Michael Jackson. He transformed from a young boy frontman to the greatest pop star on earth.
Tonight, Jackson looked great. So did his brothers. Fans say the glimpse was worth the wait because they love the superstar.
We love you! We love you, Michael!
The birth of MTV. The channel injected pop culture directly into the living rooms of Gen Xers across the globe.
I won't buy MTV.
24 hours a day on cable TV.
I want my MTV, MTV, MTV!
Yeah, too much is never enough.
The war on drugs. Crack ravaged the streets of America, and the government responded with a war.
George H.W. Bush has been in office 7 months when he addresses the nation live on TV.
This is crack cocaine. It's as innocent looking as candy.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into Settings and switch on your notifications. Number 1. Rise of personal computing.
It plays bridge, it plays checkers, it balances checkbooks, it can be used for a typewriter, it can be used for word processing applications, it can communicate with other personal computers over the telephone line.
In human history, few technological revolutions were more impactful than the rise of PCs. Early personal computers like the Apple Macintosh and IBM PC made technology accessible beyond large corporations. Innovation spread like wildfire, and productivity went through the roof.
But the computer is very much in that position now. It will be the equivalent in terms of its impact on our society of what the internal combustion engine and the automobile were.
As computers spread, so did open source software, starting in 1983 with the GNU project. The promotion of collaborative development and shared software resources continues to this day. In 1989, Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web, transforming how information was accessed and shared globally. Together, these developments democratized technology, igniting the digital revolution. They laid the foundation for the current Internet age. The spread of personal computing has since driven advancements in every industry, from farming and medicine to entertainment and trade.
The Google search engine has gotten so popular, it's given rise to something called Googling. That's where you type in the name of a friend to see how many times he or she shows up on the internet.
Do the 80s hold a special place in your heart? Let us know in the comments below.
And, who knows, it may be the world's biggest backyard fence to talk over before long.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.